Hello, wonderful people.
Well, here we go.
There we go.
I can hear you, Will.
Will, can you hear
hear
us?
us now?
What? All right, so who do we have here today? Check in, let us know that you're here in the chat box, where you're coming in from.
Okay, I'm gonna be on a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
All right, so who do we have here today? Check in, let us know that you're here in the chat box, where you're coming in from.
Okay, I'm gonna be on a little bit of a
Okay.
delay.
We'll work with it. All right, so who do we have here today?
Hey, Will, if you can hear me, what's happening is I think it's coming through your actual computer speaker and it's providing that feedback to us.
Is it repeating? All right, I need to get my...
Yeah, now we can't hear it. Okay, now we hear you live.
Yeah,
I tell you, 50-year-olds and technology.
We're gonna make it work though. Okay, so I'm just gonna get started real quick. Let's see if we can work out hopefully another solution for Will. But I want to thank you all for being here. This is a very important topic, a very important conversation, and it's one that I've been wanting to have for very, very long. I want to create a safe place for us here at Bloom where we can share very intimate stories in hopes to inspire and motivate other people. And this topic of feminism is extremely important to me. It's very important to me. I've had some experiences in my life myself. My first sexual experience, and I never told anyone, was rape. I've been in relationships where I've been physically abused and verbally abused. And unfortunately, I know that I am not alone in those numbers. So 1 in 3 women will experience violence in their lifetime. 1 in 5 women have been raped at some point in their lives. 58% of all women murdered in 2017 were killed by an intimate partner or family member. And women are just 5% of the Fortune 500 CEO list. So as we move forward in this conversation, I also want to lay it out and just say that, you know, we should respect other people's opinions and different views, and this is a safe space. And let's just dive into the topic. Let's see if we have, I don't know if we have Will back in, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what he has to say as well. We should respect other people's opinions and different views, and this is a safe space. Oh, he might be out for a little bit. Okay, so our guest here today is Shaun and Will, 2 very important people, in my opinion, 2 men that I highly respect. And I've seen them not only lead in different ways as amazing husbands. They are married to 2 of the most amazing women that I've ever met. And I can say that with confidence. But they are great men in their faith and also leaders as well. So I was very confident when I asked them to join us on this virtual stage today that they would be able to share a multifaceted view on women and how we operate in different spaces. So I just want to welcome you both here and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me to join. Contrary to the belief that may be out there, this wasn't on my honey to-do list. So I'm here on my own attribution, so on my own accord. So yes. Thank you for inviting me. This is an important topic. All the things that you relayed as far as stats go are very sobering. So it's unfortunate that those numbers are so high as it relates to such a deep and hurtful topic. But hopefully with you and other people like you, we can get things moving in the right direction and get things equalized as much as possible to make our lives and the world a much, much better place.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you there, Shaun. And you know, a lot of times conversations like this are very uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable for me sometimes to have very intimate conversations and to share stories that you kind of want to keep to yourself. But I find myself in a space like this one here at Bloom where we can share those stories, and you find out that a lot of other people have had similar journeys, and we got to figure out how we can help heal each other, understand our differences, and figure out how we can use that to empower one another and understand each other's perspectives so we can join forces. One of the things that I mentioned in my recent post, you know, feminism to me isn't a competition between men and women, it's a collaboration. You know, you're my brother, I'm your sister. I mean, not you in particular, Shaun, that would be a little weird, but you know, that's how we should all look at each other as men and women, as, you know, you're my sister, you are my brother, and I want to take, you know, help take care of you. And how can we look out for each other and empower each other and make sure that everybody has a seat at the table? D Black Newton, Mr. and Mrs. Lot Love, I love you guys. We love you too. Let us know that you're here in the chat. Mother in love you too.
Well, I think one thing that, hey Simon, how are you? Yeah, one thing I just wanted to underscore what you're saying is things not being a competition. Now, I apologize if you hear our son in the background, but
this is real life, y'all. We have children.
He's having a moment, but I think he'll be all right. So I'm just gonna ignore him like as if he's not there, but he's there and he's safe. But what was I saying? Oh, the competition part. I just want to underscore that a lot of times we as human beings, we just get up in the competitive nature of things, and unfortunately that translates to the battle of the sexes, so to speak. So not only are we competitive with each other from a man perspective or a woman perspective, we tend to also be competitive with each other, which is a great detriment to our abilities to perform optimally if we work together and we understand each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses, because then we can better complement each other, as you're saying, to strengthen the overall unity of whoever it is that's doing that work together.
Absolutely. Well, can you hear us now?
I can hear you guys now.
Yeah.
Awesome. I had to do a quick laptop change. I don't know what happened. I did the test earlier and everything was great, but I'm here now.
Okay, you made it happen. No, I appreciate you guys.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to be on this platform to talk about this topic. Yes, I do feel like it's a safe place because if we burn and crash and burn, I'm crashing and burning with one of my best friends in the whole world.
Yeah, we go down together.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so let's jump into the first question. Define feminism. How do you all define feminism? Let's start with you, Shaun.
All right, feminism. So the first thing that comes to mind is the social perception of feminism. So a lot of times the word just kind of gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
People think it's something negative, like somebody's trying to take something away from you. It's like just a bad term that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It's like, okay, I don't want to hear you and about your feministic viewpoints, because it's contrary to what it is that I believe, for example. But the true definition of feminism really is just all about equality, empowerment, bringing out the best attributes regardless of what your genitalia is between your legs, really. Because there's strength. I may be physically stronger than a female. Not all females. There's some females that are stronger than me. So I may be physically stronger than most females, but there may be some other attributes that they are much stronger than I am. So I got to capitalize on their strengths to help develop my weaknesses. And if I don't recognize that as a man, then I'm going to be stuck on stupid for a very long period of time, and I'll never grow as a result of that.
I love that. Absolutely. Will, how would you define feminism?
I agree with him that the initial thought of feminism or feminist, even for me, had somewhat of a negative connotation to it. You know, years ago, when you would hear about it, you think about, you know, women that were marching to, you know, to be exactly like men were. And you know, I don't know about you, but this morning getting ready, I had to shave the hair out of my nose because of the overgrowth. And, and I don't want women to be exactly like me. You know?
I don't think we want you in that attribute either.
I mean, yeah. So that's the realness of it. You know, as far as that goes. But I grew in my understanding of it, and realized that, you know, in many ways, just like with racism, we as people are missing each other in a lot of conversations regarding that. And it's because we come from so different backgrounds. It's the same with men and women. We have so many different experiences that it's hard for us to get them to the common ground, and then even from there, understanding that common ground, and then being an advocate for that other side, whether it be racism or you know, being pro-feminism per se. So I think, as Shaun was saying, you know, as we become more aware of each other and our strengths, then, you know, we can all become better by using each other's strengths wherever it may be. Emotional intelligence or IQ is not the only thing. You know, you can be emotionally intelligent in dealing with people. So absolutely, it's now becoming less of a negative word for me, and hopefully we can, through this bloom, we could help other people realize it's not just a negative connotation. It's really a positive thing if we do it right.
Oh, absolutely. I love the two examples that you all gave. And me also, it's all about equal rights and opportunities, you know. Men and women deserve to have the same opportunities. And I love that you all stressed about, you know, emotional strengths and emotional intelligence and the different attributes that we can all bring to the table to strengthen one another. So I think that's wonderful. So tell me, so do you think you're still, go ahead, Shaun.
No, I just want to tell a really quick story because I can tell you exactly when feminism struck an accord with me to where I viewed it as a positive thing. So that was in 1994. I was invited. I went to Tuskegee University, so I was invited to go to VMI, Virginia Military Institute, to represent Tuskegee to the George C. Marshall Conference. So we had one student, one cadet from every university that had our ROTC program across the United States at this conference. So at this conference, we had roundtables discussions about topics that affected the military. And the guest speaker was the Secretary of Defense at the time, was the Honorable Togo West. He has since passed, so rest in peace, Togo West. But he was there at the conference as the invited guest speaker. So we had to debate around these roundtables, and whoever won the debate would got to do some of the introductory remarks for Togo West. Now, being an African-American male, obviously, and Togo West, Secretary of Defense, he was African-American. I think he was the first, I'm pretty sure he was the first African-American. No, he wasn't. But anyway, Togo West, he's African-American. I wanted to do the introduction, so I made it my sole mission to win the debate so I can be on stage to do the introduction. So lo and behold, my topic at the time was women in combat arms. So at the time, we didn't have any women in any of the combat arms units in the Army. So if you're infantry, armor, air defense, military police, all the folks that do the quote unquote fighting on the front lines, women were excluded. So the topic was, should women be allowed in combat arms organizations? So my stance at the time in 1994 was absolutely not, because it presented a significant leadership challenge to the leader that's in charge of the organization in order to incorporate and adapt to women into the organization, where it be living accommodations, how do you take care of them? You have to have separate this, you got to do all these things. So my mind is just racing about all this logistical things that I have to do, I thought I had to do in order to bring women into the fold. Never mind the physical biases that I had in my head, like, well, how can they carry a rucksack? How can they fire a weapon? How can they do this? So I had all this stuff going on. But there was a very strong female that was in the group, and it came down to her and I doing this debate. And her main question was, and it was rhetorical to me, she was, "You're incapable of leading." And I was like, "Well, why do you say that?" And of course, my ego propped up. I mean, what are you talking about? I'm incapable of leading. I'm like, I'm representing my school. You know, I'm about to be a lieutenant in the Army. What are you talking about? You know, I'm incapable of leading. She was like, "You're afraid of changing yourself and your viewpoint to lead a successful unit, no matter who you have within that organization." And I could not, she left me flabbergasted. I could not come back with anything. Long story short, she did the introduction, but
Wow.
it told me right then and there to do not segregate or do not separate women from the conversation, because we need them. And if I'm trying to do that, whether knowingly or unknowingly, then it's a weakness on my part as a leader. I got to adapt. They shouldn't have to adapt. I got to adapt and include them in order to grow the entire organization. So wow. I know it's a long story, but that's one.
No, but that was an awesome story. So I'm very grateful that you shared that with us. I think many of us can take away many nuggets of wisdom from that story. So thank you for sharing.
My aha moment came a lot later than you had. You had a great moment a long time ago. Mine was. Of course, it was gradually over years, but it really hit me last year during the whole presidential debates and all of that, and the conversation that was going around about the very capable. I'm not talking politics. I don't care what your politics is, but just the fact that there were so many women running. The conversation with the pundits and with the people on different social media platforms, the things that were said about the women that were running, that was so far out of bounds for me. And I had to really check myself and look at, okay, I think I have some of these same beliefs. And why do I have these beliefs? Not saying whether I agree with one person's politics or another, but why do I have these deep-seated thoughts about a woman being president of the United States or a woman being vice president of the United States? Where does that come from? And I had to really take a deep look at myself because I was rah about the racial stuff that was going on. I'm there, and then I came across this statement of, you can't just be. I'm saying that as a lighter hue person, of some of our brothers from a lighter hue and sisters, you can't just say that you're not racist, but you also have to say that you are anti-racist, because that tells me you are putting forth the effort to stamp out this thing that is keeping a cap on our growth as a society. And that conversation immediately took me over to my thought process regarding women and leadership. And I had to do a self-check and change the way I think about it, because they were very capable women of leading the country, very, very capable of leading these organizations. And so that's when it really changed for me.
That's a great example as well, Will, because I even from a woman's perspective, I know there are a lot of women, even myself, who have heard negative stories about working for other women. So I've heard many women say, even in my youth, that they didn't want to work for other women. And that's just a terrible narrative that we just got to get rid of, because there are so many amazing women in positions of influence and power that we should embrace, and that we shouldn't just push away from them just because of their gender. So in a lot of ways, just like you said, a lot of women have been taught to not respect women in power and to only respect men in power. So I love that story. So, and I can identify and relate to that one as well. So I know you said your okay, yep. So Cheryl says, powerful story, Shaun. Your profound perspective is needed across the board. I love that. Hi, Cheryl.
Yes.
So would you all say that that now that feminism is something that's still needed today, or what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Hey,
I think so.
Oh, go ahead, Will.
No, that's your wife. Y'all in the same household.
It's a safe space already, all across the board.
All around. Yeah, I think so. Until we as a society get rid of the biases that are there, you have to have a platform to follow in that sense. That's a one voice that's moving forward. And until we have eliminated the biases that we have on a great scale, then you got to have feminism or the fight for non-bias relationships within workplace until we have a place where women are making the same amount as men if they have the same skill sets. Until we have that, we have to have it. And I like some of the things that's happening now with NASDAQ. They're talking about, they have a rule that's pending right now that they're looking at any board, a company that's with NASDAQ listed with them, that they have to have at least 2 diverse people involved on their board as an officer. And so making changes like that on a high scale will allow for more of the lower scale companies to do the same thing. We got to reach out and push for those type of things, those changes.
Definitely agree with that. Shaun, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I would just also echo that it's an educational process. So, I mean, it starts when you're young. So a lot of us have been raised to start dividing immediately, just based off of just based off of gender stereotype roles, based off of things we see on TV, things we take in through our senses. It starts right there, and then the gap just gets wider and wider and wider. So then education is the only thing I can think of really is to bring that gap and close it and bring it together. Because even I like what corporations are doing, and they're changing the demographics of the people that are sitting at the head table. I like that. I like seeing diversification. I like seeing the different genders and all that. That's all well and good. But we still got to educate folks, have the frank heart-to-heart discussion, so people don't think that folks are put in those positions just because they are a token placement. So they're up there because we had to have a female in that chair, or we had to have 2 females in that chair. And then if the feministic viewpoint from a negative perspective still exists, then that female leader will become marginalized within that organization. Because the amount of respect is just not there. It's just you just happen to be the one that's elected to make the company look good. Now let's move on. We've checked that block, so now we can move on and get on with what the good old boys are used to doing. So we got to educate the strength and the power that resonates within females that can contribute more greatly to the success of businesses, which equate to economic wealth.
Right.
I mean, it really translates into dollars, bottom line dollars. So if you really understood it, you wouldn't go down that path, which is very easy to do because that's how we're trained at a young age.
That's a great point. I want to move back to Matt McNeil had a question. He said, do you think feminism is naturally viewed as a challenge to masculinity? And as a feminist man, is that concept naturally viewed as a masculinity reduction? That's a very great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Who wants to take the first shot at this one?
Let me read the question again.
Hey, Matt. What's up, brother? That's our brother from back in the day too. I think it is a challenge nationally. I mean, we got people, men that are on podcasts that really, when you mention the word male feminism, it's a laughing stock conversation that's happening from that point on. And so they feel like if you say that you are quote unquote male feminist or you're pro feminism, the conversation is that you're losing your manhood and that you have some ulterior motive in the reason why you're siding with them. It's the them and us thing, kind of like what Shaun was talking about from birth and coming up. We're raised socially to kind of part ways and separate different things. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, type of thing, And so, yeah, I do think that it's viewed as a challenge to masculinity in a lot of ways, and so you got to be as a man, coming against that type of mentality. You got to be a strong and convinced person in who you are, and it's good to have women that are right there with us that can say, hey, listen, I love the fact that he's standing up for me as a woman, and that would encourage more and more men to kind of get rid of that whole challenge that's there.
I love that because it's a collaboration, right? We're standing together, we're united front, and we're moving forward to conquer our goal together. So, Shaun, did you have some points that you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, Will kind of said it all, right? It really goes back to a male's ego. I mean, you really got to let that go. And if you're truly centered in who you are and your capabilities, and where you're strong and where you're weak, you should be able to avail yourself. And now I know I'm preaching to the choir because it's hard for me to do. And I know my wife's on the other end. She's probably looking at me like, what the heck is this dude talking about all of a sudden? But anyway, I know it's very difficult to share your vulnerabilities with anyone. Yeah. And it takes a lot from a masculine perspective, because it feels like you're losing masculinity points. Like if somebody's out there really tracking these numbers, and at some point you go below it, and then all of a sudden, you go into some other category that you don't want to be in. You're like, no, I am a man or whatever. So you try to go out and do man things. It's almost like you're chop down some wood. Right. It's almost like, yeah, you want to go back and do some caveman type stuff just to prove your masculinity. But it just doesn't work like that. And it's funny because Key and I have been watching Naked and Afraid a lot. So that's a survivalist type of show. It's really good. But it's striking to me, a lot of the folks that break down emotionally are the men. Yeah. So they start off like, I'm from Georgia, I'm a cowboy, I'm a hunter, I'm a man's man, I do this and the other. They strip them guys naked and put them in some outdoor environment somewhere. And day 2, they're tapping out. Like they're crying because, mosquitoes are biting them or whatever. And where the female on the team is like, suck it up, buttercup. I mean, we got 14 more days to go. Are you with me or you're not? And they'll bail. They'll like leave. I just can't do this anymore. Yeah. Because they're not mentally tough. Whereas the female, they're very mentally strong, and they can overcome. We're assumed we're that way just because we have hair growing out of our ears, for example. Right. So funny. I don't, but I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now we brand new.
Okay. You must have went to the wax place and got it all eliminated or something.
Yeah, I went there one time. I'll never do that again. That
hurts. So the points that you all just brought up makes me think of the term hypermasculinity. Are you all familiar with that term?
I am now.
Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I had to look it up. I had a feeling what it was, but I usually use toxic masculinity. But when I took a look at it and really wanted to be prepared for the talk today.
I appreciate that.
That's a good thing.
You're doing great.
it grew my world a little bit because it was basically saying it's not bad for us to be men. I enjoy opening the door for my wife. She can open the door by herself just fine. There are certain times where she'll say, "Can you get that box for me?" She can lift just as much as I can. If y'all know my wife, you know,
Strong.
and she's strong, and and so I enjoy doing those things, and so someone would look at that as a hyper masculine type of activity. I'm sitting with my legs wide open, and I'm like, bravo, and this and that. But I'm good with being a man, and she's good with being a woman, and she's okay with what I do for her. And I think if we kind of eliminate this thing where we're dividing each other, and we allow men to be men, women to be women, and not go overboard and come to the place where we're now stopping women from being their best self because our masculinity is overriding them.
Right.
I think that's becomes toxic, where my action is intimidating or seeking to get the better end because I'm a man.
Right. Or making someone else feel small. Right.
Right. Trying to make the woman be small with me around because I'm trying to make myself bigger. Just be ourselves, consider one another, prefer one another, honor each other. And I think we can get rid of all this, the nonsense that goes around, in our relationships and in our society.
I love that. Shaun, before I let you answer that question, I want to cut in real quick. There's a book that I want people to watch out for. It's called Male versus Man. It's by DeAndre Whitfield. And he says, boys look to be served and men look to be of service. So he said, you're born a male, but a man is developed through education. So being a man isn't about age. So that's the difference in his perspective. It's some of the things that he talks about in his book. And so I thought I wanted to bring that up today because I thought that was really profound. So Shaun, I'll go ahead and let you take the chair and go ahead and explain what your ideas of hypermasculinity are.
Yeah, again, it starts young. We're kind of groomed that way to be overly masculine. I mean, I remember in a Catholic school we had a no touch rule because we would try to fight each other all the time. And so since we had a no touch rule and none of the nuns were allowed in the boys' bathroom, we would go in the bathroom and literally like just punch on each other just to prove how masculine we were. And if you cried, you were a punk, so you was like, everybody laughed at you, pointed your finger. And so the ones that couldn't punch as hard or couldn't take the chest shots or the stomach blows, their self-esteem was severely damaged, I'm sure, as a result. And so then they had to do things to overcompensate for what they thought was being a weakness, or what we saw as being a weakness. And who knows how those guys are to this day psychologically. I lost contact with these folks. I often think about, those drills in the bathrooms that we would do in the 7th, 8th grade, and the little boys that weren't as big as some of the other boys. I mean, we put a pretty good beating on those kids in the bathroom as far as causing them some pain to see if they would cry. And if they didn't cry, then it's like, well, yeah, you're tough. You're part of the club. If you cried, then you're just weak, and then you're on the island of misfit toys because you're definitely not. You're not part of the crew. You're not a guy yet. You need to man up. Whatever that means. You need to man up.
That's a great example of toxic conversation right there, using terms like that, like man up. What does that exactly look like? Can men not process emotions? Can we not be sensitive?
Right. So it just dams up your emotional connection with, especially with people of the opposite sex. So it's very hard to kind of get through and get to what was once fertile ground, because it's all been tilled up and it's kind of like unkept soil. So you can't grow anything out of it. So you go back and you kind of fertilize it and nurture it. and you get back to the other part of yourself where you were nurturing. You know, it was like,
Mhm.
you know, when you first came out of your mom's womb and you were with your mom as
Yeah.
a male and you're growing up and you're hugging her and all this other stuff. But at some point, it just completely went off the rails because it's like, okay, now it's time for you to become a man's man. And if you're a man's man, you do man things. So that's when you resort to the caveman and you go out and you start, like you said, chopping wood. I don't want to chop wood. I have no desire to be out there chopping wood, but if that's what men do, then I'm gonna go out there and chop some wood.
So, Shaun, with the topics and the points that you just mentioned, so how do we create more of a balance moving forward with some of the hypermasculinity traits that a lot of people of our generation, older generations have experienced? How do we balance that out and teach young boys, young men that it's okay to, you know, to express your emotions and I don't know if gentle is the right term that you all would like to hear, or, you know, just, you know, but gentle's probably not the right word that you probably want to hear right now.
Let me see if that's in a masculinity book. Yeah, we're good.
But but how do you create more of a balance and kind of push away from those, I don't know, dated social norms that have been stigmatized and attached to men?
Yeah,
what's the conversation like now?
Yeah, that's a tough question because, you know, Issa is about to be 3. So he is definitely a mama's boy through and through. But you're right, there is a balance that needs to occur where he still exhibits some of the attributes that a man should do if he so chooses to throughout his life. So he's being not hyper masculine about it, but he's being more like chivalrous. So, you know, I'm gonna open your door because I'm being. It's not that you can't open your door. I think, Will, you had some comments or some examples of this earlier. You know, it's not that you can't open your door. You can't do this. You can't take the trash out. You can't mow the lawn, even I don't cut grass. But you know, those type of things. I'm going to do it for you because I want to. I want to serve you in that way. So when you look at it that way, it's not like, oh, it's a man's job to do whatever. It's just, no, it's just now I'm serving you. You're my queen. I don't want you doing this. Let me serve you by doing these things that you may not like to do. You may be like, you know what? I'm tired of you taking out the trash. I would really love to take the trash out.
Right.
Then I got to follow my pride and be like, okay, go ahead and take the trash out. Even though all the neighbors will probably think I'm a punk or a bad husband. But we already know that that's what you wanted to do, so you're doing it. And it's like, it's going to be okay.
That's a great example. Thank you for that. So I want to switch back to workplace inequality amongst women. It's women. I'd like you to share your stories too, if you have any experiences in that area. But I've had times where I've gone to interviews and people have asked me if I have children, you know, do I have childcare available, and all different types of conversations, situations where you're not being paid the same compensation as your male counterpart. Have you all ever had a moment in time where you're at work and you've ever thought about inequality from a woman's perspective, or had a situation similar that has presented itself to you?
Yeah.
Shaun, I see you shaking your head.
Oh, you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I see you shaking your head.
The one that comes to mind is when I was in the Army, I had interviewed, I think, five subordinate commanders separately to see who the best person was for this opportunity to command an organization of about 150 folks. So I took, you know, obviously I'm taking that extremely seriously, and I want the best person. So it didn't matter. I mean, you could look like a giraffe in combat boots. If you were the best one, then guess what? A giraffe in combat boots is going to command that organization. So it was 4 males and 1 female. So the female was by far the best candidate for the position. And so I was like, I offered her the position. Like, this is yours. You want it, you take it. She was elated about it, and so on and so forth. No issues whatsoever. About 3 weeks later, and this is probably about a month out when she's supposed to take over, she was sitting outside of my office, and I came up the stairs and I saw her sitting there, and she was crying. And I was like, "Hey, you all right? What's going on?" I was like, "Come in my office. Let's, sit down. Let's talk. Whatever." So she sat down at the table, and I'm thinking like somebody passed away or something like that. Something happened to her. Just something catastrophic. So I'm like, "What's going on?" And she was like, "Sir, I'm pregnant." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She's like, "I'm pregnant." I'm like, "So are you happy about that? Are you sad? Like, I don't get why you seem upset about it." She was like, "Well, I'm pregnant, so there's no way I can take command, and I'm pregnant." I'm like, "Well, who told you that?" She's like, "Well, that's what I have heard." And it was true. Like in the military, it was a big stigma on women to be in a command position. So that means you're up in front of soldiers and you're pregnant. Like that was like a taboo thing, which didn't make sense to me. So I was like, that's why I was kind of put off by her reaction. So she's like, "Yeah, I'm pregnant." I'm like, "Well, so are you telling me that you don't want to command? Because if you don't want to command, that's one thing. But as far as being able to command, that's totally up to you. And I still have trust and confidence in your ability to command. So I expect for you to command." And she was like, "Really?" I mean, she was like a big weight was lifted off of her. A huge weight. Now, with that too, now people that were higher than me actually questioned my decision to put her in command because she was single, she's pregnant, and what kind of example are we setting for young soldiers that we have a unwed woman that's pregnant commanding the organization? And my response to my superiors was, "That's life. I mean, that's life. I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, there are people out there that get pregnant that aren't married. I mean, this is not 1950. Even in the 50s, people, got pregnant and they weren't married. So quit living in this fantasy land based off of what you saw on Leave It to Beaver or whatever. I mean, just come on." And she turned out to be just like I thought, the best commander that I had during that time period. The best one, both physically and mentally.
Yeah. I thought about your story, and I realized, there were men. There was a man that got her pregnant too, and there's men that get women pregnant and they're leading in the military. So that double standard is ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
So
for me in the workplace, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
For me in the workplace, it was more seeing where the income disparity was. And I didn't dig into it so much, but I would see it to the point where when my daughter or my wife, they were going up for another job. Like just recently, there were signing bonuses that were on the table for her. And I realized that many women don't know or have a difficulty asking for what they deserve when it comes to that. And so more like I think Shaun was saying earlier, the education component, educating them on how to negotiate what you deserve in your pay. How to, there was so much money as far as signing bonuses on the table for my wife. And she was so excited about just being offered the bonuses to where I say, "Wait a minute, whoa, let's take a look at this. Yeah, I think you can get another month of income, as a bonus." And I say, "Just ask for it." And so she did, and boom, she got it. It was just a matter of knowing that you can ask for it and being confident in doing that, and not thinking that the opportunity will go away because you did ask for it. But I think men in corporate America, they're more apt to, asking for that amount, just put it out there, going for the higher incomes. And so, when I was in corporate America and, making those type of decisions, you could see where the men knew that they can ask, whereas the women, they pretty much would go for whatever you offered. And so we got to train our daughters and our wives in how how to be confident in doing that.
Yeah, I love that. So that brings me to my next question. So you both have young daughters. What's the conversation like with your daughters to help develop them with all of the experience and the breadth of knowledge that you've gained throughout your life to make sure that they are powerful, sharp individuals that are walking into spaces fully expanded as their own and confident? What are some of the tips and the things you're instilling in them these days?
You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
But, yeah.
Okay, I have two. I have a 32-year-old and a 16-year-old, and so it's for me. It was really knowing who they were, what their personalities were like. You know, the 32-year-old is more aggressive. She's outgoing. She's going for it. You know, and so for her, I had to kind of impart how to balance yourself more. You know, you can't think it and say it immediately. None of us really can when we're talking about leading people or we're talking about collaborating on certain teams or whatever. So I had to kind of show her how to balance her strength and not come across in certain ways so that she can further her career. Whereas my other daughter, she's more laid back. And so for her, and plus she's a lot younger, you know, getting her involved in STEM technology type education, letting her know the importance of science and math and encouraging her in that so she can strengthen her knowledge platform with that. And I think some of it is she just wasn't interested. You know, it's like you see all these opportunities for people that can get into computer science or any of the STEM careers, but she wasn't. She was more so the artsy side. So we had to figure out how we can encourage her on the arts side, but also know that there's a deeper or more rounded person that can be involved in the arts. You know, you still need to learn how, if you want to, you know, say she's going to run a dance shop or run a art museum or something like that, you still need to know how to handle business. You know, there's still some technology that you can utilize to increase your business. So for my children, my daughters, it was more so not so much focusing on what's being taken away from them, because, you know, what you focus on enlarges. And so I had to try to make them focus on what can we do to make you your best self, and then push that area more so than what she can't do.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I love hearing that. Shaun, you want to add on to that?
Yeah,
what's your plan for our babies?
Well, Lauren, no, she's about to be 7, and as you know, Lauren is, I think she's well advanced as far as where she's at, as far as she knows who she is, and she is very persistent and very, I would say, not, I want to say dominant in what she feels. Like she knows herself, and she's not afraid to put it out there. Yeah, so she's headed in the right direction, and I'm happy about that, because it's gonna be interesting to see what she does, because she likes the art just as much as she likes the sciences, just as much as she likes the animals, dance or whatever. So she's kind of got a whole smorgasbord of things, of options to kind of cultivate what it is that she wants to be for herself, which is definitely not inside of a stereotypical type of box when it comes to male female opportunities. That's for sure. One thing is difficult though, is just being a father to our other daughter that's not living here. So that's presents a whole new set of challenges, because she doesn't necessarily get the attention that we would like her to have from having these type of discussions continually, to help her with her self-esteem and her confidence. Because when she visits us here, we do notice that she's confident in areas that are more in private. So she'll go like away and then focus on her art. She's a really good artist, so she'll do like a lot of her artwork. And she's a really good reader. She'll focus on reading, but she does things like in her own personal little silos in order to cultivate herself. So it's a little bit hard to kind of figure out where she's at and where she's going, just by virtue of the time and space that we are away from each other. So that's a whole new set of challenges that we just have to overcome. But I am happy with where both our daughters are at as far as their mental state on knowing who they are beyond just being a female, because there's a lot to it, as we all know, and we're all talking about, than what society may define it as.
Yeah, I love what Cheryl just posted a comment. She said, I feel like most of the prejudice and biases stem from how a person was raised, what they saw, and more basically, this is how it's done. If we can learn to deal with people from our hearts and not our titles, that's very profound, and not our titles and positions, then I feel like a recipe for harmony and peace will exist. I love that.
Go, baby.
Yeah, that was amazing. I can 100% relate to Cheryl's comment there. I mean, I've had, pretty much my whole upbringing was making me smaller. A lot of people in my life, you're not supposed, women can't do this, women can't be leaders. And then getting out into, working for the DOD and other experiences, I started seeing other women in charge and, partnering with men. And I was like, wow, they are doing it. There's a woman that's a pastor of a church, and it just, completely, unveiled and changed my perspective. So I definitely can relate to that comment. So let me ask you, let's switch topics and let's talk a little bit about violence against women. So as we talked about earlier, 1 in 3 women will experience violence in their lifetime and sexual assault. Those numbers are extremely high. So if you think of 3 people in this chat, 3 people who have daughters, at least one of them will experience domestic violence and or a sexual assault. I can even think of times that I've had, in my youth, going out with, to a lounge with girlfriends, guys would just grab you, and it's just so disrespectful. So how do we cultivate a different culture and influence other people to respect women, to harmonize with women, to not be violent with women, and things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, wow. One thing, again, that statistic is very sobering. And then when you put us in it, like 1 in 3, and then you got us 3 here, and we're like, oh, well, one of y'all is like, oh, shoot,
right.
That really brings it home. So thanks for scaring the crap out of me. But anyway, so what we can do about it is, again, it goes back to how we raise our children. So we got to teach our kids to love and respect each other, brother, sister, or friends, or whomever. And I realize I don't live in this utopia where every household is like that and are going to teach their kids that. And then we got to lean on other folks like teachers. That African proverb where it takes a village, it really does when you think about it. It takes a village to kind of teach the younger folks that is not okay. It's not okay, despite, that beat that you hear in whatever song or that rap song or whatever, you really like it. But the messaging that's getting put out there is not okay. That's really degrading. That's really disrespectful. That's this, that's the other. And myself included, because I love a good hardcore rap beat, because I put it in my ear and I'm at the gym and it gets me moving. But sometimes when I'm not moving, when I'm like, okay, now it's time for me to bring it down, I start listening to these lyrics. I'm like, what the heck am I listening to? Mm-hmm. So I'm not listening to the words. But just because I'm not actively listening doesn't mean I'm passively not listening. It could be seeping in there somewhere where it's creating some kind of issue with me internally that may manifest itself in some way where I'm like, I don't even know where this came from. Well, it may have come from that song that I was listening to in the gym or something. So I got to just be mindful of that so I can be in better control of my emotions, the he emotions in me, so I don't act out beyond my control. And there's a lot of men out there that just don't control themselves. You know, they're more of the rabid dog type of nature because that's the way they grew up. They look at people as objects versus other people of equalness. You know, they're of life. You know, they're
Right.
equal. You know, that's my sister. That's my wife. That's my whomever. I should not do this or whatever. Let me control my urge that I got from wherever to not do whatever or not say whatever because that is disrespectful. And it takes
Mm-hmm.
a great deal of strength to do that. So if you want to talk about masculinity, I mean, if you got that type of strength on top of regular masculinity strength, that's a really strong man, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, I definitely agree.
I also I know that exactly what Shaun is saying, and we can't really discount the the fact that testosterone does a major deal on young men, and then the lack of testosterone as we age can do a major thing to us mentally and emotionally. And so I think as older men, we've come through a lot. We've realized, some of the things that our parents did or our grandparents did or what we've seen other men do was very toxic. It was very, one-sided, and it should not have been. But it, like you were saying, it seeped into you somehow from what you're seeing or what you're hearing, and so I love the fact that we can, I don't have any boys. I'm a girl dad all the way, but I have nephews, and I pull them aside and I'll start talking to them. I'll give them a hug. A lot of times we feel like once they hit 16, 17, we're not hugging them no more.
Yes.
We did that when we were kids. I'll tell them I love them. So they need to see that masculinity and manhood is not only the brawn and just this and don't cry, and I use what a man is as encouragement to them to step out of that thing where your testosterone is driving you to do the things that you hear in these songs or to do the things that you just feel in your own self, because it really is driving you. How can you channel that in the right way? How can you maybe go work out and work off some of that steam? But when you're in a conversation with your spouse or your partner, or you're you're in a situation where your emotions are getting the best of you, you can't sit back and let testosterone lead. You gotta get out of that situation, find another time to talk about it. On the flip side, we also have chemical changes that happen in our women, and we got to know when that's happening, and that hormone or whatever is running things at that moment, and how to recognize that and get out of that situation, or redirect the conversation, understanding, having some compassion. I've become more and more aware of that as I age. I'm 51 now, and my wife kind of hit the perimenopause first, and I had to figure out, okay, what's going on with her emotionally, and then the menopause started to come, and like, okay, but then in my research, I'm realizing that men, we go through this thing called andropause, and you find yourself going off. I see your eyes. You 50, you 51 as well. So we start having those chemical changes that's happening, and we got to know how to handle that. Really, we got to know how to deal with that, so that we're not becoming violent in our relationships, and the women are becoming violent toward the men, and the arguments just spiral out of control. And so that's a big question that you asked, and it can be a real issue if you don't know how to handle it. So I'm looking at some of the comments. Those hormones and emotions are a mother.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are.
Yeah.
Kim mentioned, she said, I believe it goes back to starting at home and how people were raised. She said her ex-husband was abusive, and he also watched his father abused his mother during their entire childhood. And many positive role models he had in his church, et cetera, he still drew from what he saw in his home. Ooh, thank you for sharing that, Kim. Yeah, that goes back to exactly what you all are saying. That is extremely tough. It's about, like you said, showing up, modeling the image. And that's another reason why I really appreciate you all for coming on Bloom today, in hopes that this message will really reach a lot of different people and that we can all learn and sharpen each other. So that is definitely the goal. So let's talk about gender norms. How do you all feel about gender norms? And I think Cheryl asked the question also. She said, how do you feel about women making more money than their spouse?
Yes.
Hey, I'm all for it. You bring more to this party. Hey. Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people will say that, and I know you all, you know, you both are very encouraging, supportive, and empower your wives. But a lot of men I've heard will say that I have no problem with my wife making more money than me, but it's the foundation that starts, the conversation that starts initially pouring into her when she's not necessarily making a substantial amount of money that will help enable her to get to that point. So I'll go ahead and let you all expand on gender norms and if you feel okay with your spouse making more.
It can be, you know, I think when it can be a difficulty is when if the woman does that whole thing where it's almost like, okay, if a man is making more money he becomes toxic in that toward her, it can be the same thing flipped, you know, where all of a sudden now when you used to come together to talk about purchases, now it's like, okay, I'm just going to purchase because I'm making more money. You know, that can be toxic from both sides. And so it becomes a thing where we have to just be good with understanding that this is one household and we're all on the same team for this household to be successful. And so, I mean, my wife and I, we've had both sides of that coin happen where, you know, I've been that one making a whole bunch more money. And there was a time where I you know, you're talking about gender norms. I wanted her to stay home. You know, she was home, and after our second daughter was born, she was off work for a year, and I was like good with it. You know, I mean, struggling, trying to keep 2 mortgages going. I'm like, I got this. You stay home. You stay home. You know, it was all this thing that you know, as we talked about it more and more, it's like, okay, what did you see when you were growing up? Well, a lot of times I saw my mom home, you know, and that was because as a military wife, she had to uproot her whole career every time we moved 3 years. And so it's almost easier for her to just kind of take care of the kids and be home and be that mom, you know, and so, you know, that seeps into your psyche. And so I'm like wanting her to be home. And my wife is not a stay-at-home type of woman. She's a go-getter, you know, and so she's her best self when she's out going and getting it. And so I moved to the next level where I'm saying, okay, if she's going to be out there getting it, let me be her biggest cheerleader and supporter, and let me find out how I can get in and do what I'm good at in support of what she's doing, you know. And so when you realize you're on the same team and there's no big I, little you, then it goes a lot more smoothly when you're dealing in relationships and who's making more money than the other.
Very, very true. Shaun, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just saying, I agree. When you have a strong partnership in a relationship, that's kind of, I mean, those are like, that's not even an issue, really. It shouldn't even be an issue because, it's like you're saying, it's all one big pot, so it all goes in. Then it's just a matter of prioritization on what it is that we want to do together, regardless of where it comes from. And how can I best, again, it comes back to having a servant heart. How can I best serve in the moment? So I remember when we moved here first to Huntsville, I wasn't the first one that went out and started working. The kid got the job first. So she was basically running the household, so to speak, from a financial perspective. And I was doing things that I was not normally used to doing. So I got on YouTube, learned how to cook. I learned how to take care of Lauren, you know, in the crib, in and out. I was doing all like the daddy daycare things to free her up. So to make sure she had a good hot breakfast in the morning and her lunch was packed, and see her out the door and go about my day and figure out what I'm going to cook for dinner when she got home and all that. So I did that for quite a long period of time. And it wasn't no
that was sexy. I was like, I'm getting used to this.
You know, it wasn't a blow to my ego or anything. It was just one of those things that, like, look, in the moment, we got to do what we got to do to take care of one another so we can get through what we're going through. And why make it miserable? We can make it fun and I guess sexy now that I learned. You know, she thinks it's sexy.
That's sexy.
Right. So sexiness in and of itself is a great motivator. So. So it really doesn't matter, you know, when it comes down to it. If she's making quadruple what I make, it's still better than where we were before. So why am I going to get mad at her success? Because what's for her is for her, which is for us. The same as what's for me is for me, which is for us. So it's just like why go back and forth about it? It's just it's kind of dumb in my opinion. The people that kind of do that. It's kind of childish, you know, and immature. And it kind of makes me wonder how strong your relationship is if you have that type of ego battle going on when it comes to money. I mean, I get it because of how we're raised, but at some point you got to be like, wait a minute, we're on the same team. We're both surviving together. That's why I like that show, Naked and Afraid. Strip everything down. It's just two of you. You know, how do you survive? Make this work? And you figure it out, and you overcome, you adapt, you grow closer together, and you live to see another day. I mean, that's what it's all about.
I got to go on YouTube and learn how to cook a little bit more.
Oh yeah, YouTube is it. I'm telling you.
Look, I see Cheryl smile all through Facebook all the time. I'm sure she's good.
Yeah.
Happy woman. We are.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I'm so loving this conversation. As I look at the chat, a lot of other people are too. My mother-in-law, yep, that's what partners do. And you and Dad do the same thing. So you're leading by example. So I want to ask you all, you know, a lot of times this type of conversation should happen in other settings. It should happen in professional settings, other settings at home. How do we encourage how do we encourage conversation around topics that may seem controversial?
Well, I think one thing you could do is leverage some of the things that are out there. For example, it just so happens to be March is Women's Awareness Month. So what perfect time to have this conversation, but now, I mean, it gives you an excuse really to have the discussion. Like, okay, now we're going to have a discussion about this. Not that you have to wait till March, but at least that gives you an injection point, just like February is Black Awareness History Month. I mean, it should be that way all the time, and you should be open and free to have the discussion whenever. But if you right, yeah, you're right. If there ever is a reason for you, if you need a reason to have the discussion, just use one of those months to kind of inject the conversation there, and that will kind of give you some leverage to go on. Well, since it happens to be the month, and let's just talk about this or whatever, to kind of ease it a little bit. But again, if you get beside yourself and take yourself out of it, then I don't think the conversation becomes difficult at all. If you know what you're talking about, and if you know yourself. Now, if you don't know yourself, you may surprise yourself that you may be the sexist bigot one that's anti-feminism, and you just never knew it. But by you talking about it, kind of the light bulbs are coming on to you, like, oh shoot, I didn't know that I was that guy. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So we kind of just need to step out there. And shout out to our parents too, because I know Will's parents, I know my parents are there. I mean, they did a great job with us, kind of teaching us these things, even if it wasn't directly, but kind of indirectly showing us things by their actions or inactions or whatever the case may be. But you're going to pick up these things. You're not born with these traits and attributes. You gotta learn them, and you're gonna learn from somewhere. If you don't learn it the right way, you're definitely gonna learn it the wrong way. And unfortunately, in our society, people they gravitate towards the wrong way because it's labeled in a cool way. You know, it's cool. It's manly. It's this. It's all the things that you really want to be. But you know, you're gonna pay a price for it. You know.
Yeah. And I when you were talking, it reminded me of the whole thing about privilege. you know, there has to be a male privilege if there's this, if we're in majority in business. And so sometimes it's hard to recognize the privilege that we have, you know, and I understand that, you know, there is some things that we have challenges in as Black men, but we're still more privileged than a Black woman per se, more privileged than women per se in certain areas. And so, and when you're having those conversations that are controversial, I think it's best to get into a place where you have a safe place with people that are safe for you to talk to before you start spewing out things in social media or you know, or to people that are in groups that you're not aware of. Because if your mindset is not where it should be, and you're not recognizing where your privilege is as a man, then you need to have conversations where it's safe, to where you can say those things that are controversial without the judgment, but with the correction that comes with it, and adjust your mindset or stick to what you have, and at least you know what you're coming into. You know, there may be some men that they're gonna die with the mentality that they have regarding women. But if you're gonna die on that hill, then at least you need to know that it's something that you should that you have a wrong thought about, and people are not perceiving it in the best way, and give yourself a chance to kind of alter where your mindset is because of how you grew up or whatever. So my advice would be get into a safe place with people that are safe for you to have a conversation and correct those cultural ideas that you have, that paradigm that you have when dealing with women, so that you can become, you know, if you do it, the good thing about it is everybody around you becomes better when you can recognize the strength that women have, and the strength that they have given us in our society. And if they're not capped on what they're doing, how much greater we could be, you know, as a society.
Absolutely.
I love that. I mean, what better way to end this discussion? Honestly, you know, I hope as a culture that we move away from what they call cancel culture, where someone expresses something that they feel and we don't agree with them, and we just automatically just cancel them out. You know, like Will was saying, like Shaun was saying, we have to be open to other people's perspective, listen with an open heart, because if people aren't sharing what they believe, then we're not going to be able to reach a point of unity so we can come together and understand one another. So that is all about what we are about here at Bloom. Shaun and Will, you guys are amazing. You blew this conversation out the water. I definitely appreciate you all for taking the time to strengthen and empower women. You do this every day of your life with your daughters, with your wives, sisters, people in your church, and just in your community. So that's definitely the main reason why I wanted to have you all here, so you could share your experience and so it could reach multiple people. And I just thank you all so much.
Happy Women's History Day, a month.
Yes, yeah. Women's History Month.
Yes.
Yes. And thank you all for joining in the chats. I see you all have shared some very vulnerable experiences as well. I know it takes a lot to reach that point where you share something that you've experienced, because it's very painful, very, very painful to share some type of hurt that you've experienced in the past. Thank you for leaders, women leaders, male leaders, for sharing their experiences here in the chat. You all have showed up as your best self, empowered and strong. And I just appreciate everyone for showing up today. Next week, we're going to be talking about negotiation skills. So I know Will talked about that. This is going to be very important for women, showing up to the table and not asking, demanding in a smart, strategic way what you are worth and knowing your value. So that's going to be the topic for next Monday. So stay tuned in, and I thank you all again, and we will see you next week. Thanks for being with us.
All right, thank you. Let me go make my baby some lunch.
Hey, I'm getting in there.
No pressure. No pressure. Y'all are crazy.
All right.
See y'all.